For more on this, we're going to bring in Kiron Skinner, Fox News foreign policy analyst, Toby Professor of International Relations at Carnegie Mellon University and research fellow at the Hoover Institution, and always with great analysis. So let me first by asking you, Professor, how do you interpret this latest reporting?
It just reminds us that the Syrian conflict is not over. 7 years into a civil war that's been incredibly bloody, that's been one of the greatest humanitarian crises in the 21st century, still has many miles to go. This is a long war on many fronts. It's a civil war in Syria. It's a war for the battle of ending jihad, radical Islam, al-Qaeda, its affiliates, and ISIS. They're not gone. It's a great power conflict with the Russians and the Americans on different sides. Both want to see ISIS destroyed, but not both on the side of Assad. The Russians have been there to support him and keep him in power.
Right.
As you know, Secretary Tillerson recently gave a talk at Stanford where he in fact said, we want to see a transition in leadership. So very different objectives in a tight, competitive environment.
So we know that Russia already reportedly struck back by firing cruise missiles into northwest Syria, the Idlib province. This is according to Russia's Ministry of Defense, killing supposedly approximately 30 al-Qaeda militants. Are we certain that those were al-Qaeda affiliate al-Nusra militants who shot down that plane and not shot down by anti-Assad government groups? There's a report out there that says the Free Syrian Army fighters did so. If that is the case, which again, I don't have that confirmation at the moment, if that's the case, how would that change the equation?
That's a scary dynamic because it puts the United States and Russia in more direct conflict with each other because of the fact that we have supported Free Syrian forces. But I think there's a bigger issue going on here. We're still getting reporting on who did what. The fact of the matter is that everyone's involved in northern Syria. This province is the final stronghold of militants, and the Assad regime is laid fire on just tens of thousands of innocents and civilians.
Yes.
And who are now fleeing a place that they had seen as safe haven. So the refugee crisis and the movement, the forced movement of people continues. This is just really not ending anytime soon.
And as you already pointed out, listen, you know, it's very well known that Vladimir Putin is the most fierce supporter of Bashar al-Assad, the Syrian president. So what should the UN, NATO, and UN officials, including the U.S., what should the NATO countries do? Should they monitor this from afar, sort of watch to see how this develops, or is there something else that they can do in a more proactive fashion?
Both things that you've suggested, Arvel, are important. Arthel, we should stand back and let this play out and get the true facts, because there are a lot of evolving discussions about what's going on the ground, and video is still emerging. But the NATO and allied and Western forces, and along with Middle East partners, need to be as unified as possible around a common goal, which is to end the conflict in Syria and really support in at least an eventual transition of leadership in that country. But it must be understood that the global war on terror continues, and Syria is a major battleground. We can't let down our guard, and that's where American leadership is so central for our allies to keep them engaged.
I want to have something else to ask about that, but I have to go on because when you mention that the American leadership has to stand strong and be fierce and not let up, then that brings me to what about our president and President Putin, and if our president will put the pressure on, more pressure, and he is already doing some pushing back on President Putin, but we'll see if there's more. But I have to move on because I want to talk about our president in North Korea. I want to show you some sound, our audience some sounds of the president with some North Korean defectors in the Oval Office yesterday. Take a listen.
Many administrations that should have acted on this a long time ago, when it wasn't at this kind of when we weren't in this kind of a position. You know, we ran out of road. You know the expression. The road really ended. They could have done it 12 years ago. They could have done it 20 years ago. They could have done it 4 years ago and 2 years ago. we have no road left. So we'll see what happens. But in the meantime, we'll get through the Olympics, and maybe something good can come out of the Olympics.
So that was President Trump yesterday in the Oval Office, of course, saying, look, this is all ahead of the Olympics in South Korea. Let's see what happens after that. Is the president setting up something, Professor Skinner, or telegraphing a message? And how might Kim Jong-un perceive the meetings at the White House? Because he is dying to be received that way. Give me 40 seconds, please.
Okay. I want to say that the president's doing the right thing because the source of tension with North Korea is not around missiles, actually. They are a symptom of the deeper problem, which is the illegitimacy of the Korean regime. And when you talk to defectors and bring them to the Oval Office, you're getting closer to the heart of the problem in North Korea, which is one of the world's great humanitarian crises over many decades. And when defectors begin to tell the truth in the presence of American leadership, it sends a signal to the world. This is the beginning of really resolving the North Korean crisis.
Yeah, and seeing Ji Sung-ho at the State of the Union the other night was really, really powerful. Professor Kiron Skinner, always a pleasure. Thank you very much. We'll see you again.
Thank you.